to this, but it's very much there, and it's very much something to celebrate. And they're creating a next generation capabilities and providing greater global presence as a deterrent to our enemies. I am so honored and privileged to be here. Thank you all once again for making this day possible. Congratulations on a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Davis. I'd like to now introduce the distinguished leader representing California's 57th Congressional District, Congressman Scott Peters.
Good morning, and for those of you visiting, welcome to Coronado and to San Diego. It's a pleasure to be here with you. The large ball of light in the sky is known as the sun. Some of you don't see it in the winter, but it's one of the things we enjoy here. I want to thank Secretary Maybus and Secretary Vilsack for being here in Coronado for the groundbreaking launch of the Green Fleet, Great Green Fleet. It was just a few months ago that I stood here with Secretary Maybus to announce the Navy and Marine Corps purchase of an unprecedented amount of solar energy from Sempra, and the Great Green Fleet is the next step in advancing energy security as national security. Because of the Secretary's leadership, we're launching the first of its kind naval force that will project power around the world while being fueled by American innovation. I often speak to folks about the military's advancements on renewable energy, and they ask, what is it about the military that they see that as important? And why is the Navy powering its ships with alternative energy and biofuels? Why are the Marines powering their bunkers with solar panels and their devices with personal solar panels? And the answer is not that the military are tree huggers. The answer is that our military leadership, particularly Secretary Maybus, recognize that reducing our reliance on foreign fuel is a national security imperative. I'm going to wait. That's right. It's alternative energy right there. When the price of oil spikes, it takes funds away from our troops and our other mission priorities. So diversifying our fuel sources improves our ability to effectively budget missions and for preparedness while keeping troops out of harm's way in the battlefield. So the Navy's investment in alternative fuel sources is important on the battlefield, and it's also driving investment in the research in the private sector. It's particularly appropriate that we have these ceremonies here in San Diego, where we have a world-class innovation economy. Our local labs and research institutions have contributed to some of the developments we're seeing here today. For instance, researchers at UCSD are pioneering the use of algae potentially as a feedstock for advanced biofuels. Actually, I am the co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional Algae Caucus. So if they tell you you can't get a leadership position as a freshman Congress member, you tell them about Peters and pond scum. But it's a great way to join the innovation that's happening in San Diego with what we need in Washington and in the military. So in Congress, I've fought for the diversification of our energy supply and introduced legislation that increases our military's energy efficiency. The Department of Defense Energy Security Act will give our leaders like Secretary Maybus the tools to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and speed up the development of alternative energy sources. And as we continue to hear numerous times today from military leaders and energy specialists, investments in alternative energy sources protect our military personnel, save money, and are essential for our national security. So I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Secretaries Maybus and Vilsack for the invitation to join you. I'll let you know that you have a proud partner in me and in San Diego in moving these efforts forward. Congratulations to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Peters. It's now my pleasure to introduce the former governor of Iowa and steadfast partner in the Great Green Fleet Initiative, our 30th Secretary of Agriculture, the Honorable Tom Vilsack.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is certainly a privilege and honor to be here this morning. Certainly it's an honor to be here in the presence of several members of Congress, obviously military leaders, but I deem it the greatest honor to be in the presence of all of those who are in our armed forces. I haven't always been as humble about this, as Secretary Maybus will probably remember. soon after I got this job as Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Maybus and I were at the White House together. I was pretty full of myself with this new job, and I leaned over to him and I said, you know, we got 100,000 people working at USDA. I mean, we got a huge operation. And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, I got 990,000 Marines and sailors and a whole bunch of ships, tanks, and airplanes. So I've always been very respectful of Ray Maybus since that conversation. I am pleased to be here also because we are, as Ray knows, a military family and a Navy family. I'm proud of our Navy roots. My nephew Sam Bell served as a Marine out of San Diego, was stationed in Afghanistan for a period of time, is now a student at the University of Northern Arizona. My father-in-law served in World War II as a naval aviator. My uncle, Charlie Young, was the commander of the 2nd Nuclear Submarine in our Navy's history, and my great-uncle Casson Young is a Medal of Honor recipient for bravery at Pearl Harbor. So I feel very, very honored to be here today. And I feel particularly honored to be with my friend Ray Maybus, who had the vision and the foresight to see the importance of diversifying the energy sources and fuel sources for our Navy and our military. We're excited about the fact that the Navy is going to use 77.7 million gallons of a blended biofuel here in connection with the Great Green Fleet. We know each year the Navy uses over 28 million barrels of liquid fuel, so that's a tremendous opportunity for us in the biofuel area to partner with the Navy, to partner with the Defense Department and the Energy Department to expand and diversify our efforts. We've committed collectively over a long period of time, not in this particular circumstance, but over a long period of time, a substantial amount of money to expand the purchase of biofuel and renewable energy for the Navy. We want to create a drop-in aviation and marine fuel that will allow Ray to essentially reach the vision that he so forcefully articulated several years ago of 50% of the Navy's energy needs being met from renewable sources. Why is this important? Well, it's important for the reasons that the Congress representatives have indicated, but it's also important from a standpoint of the Midwest economy, the national rural economy. You see, 15% of America lives in rural America, but nearly 40% of your military comes from those small towns. And our challenge in rural America is to have an economy that supports families so that they can live, work, and raise their children in those small towns so that they can continue to provide the service to this great country. Kids who grow up in rural areas, they learn a very valuable lesson that is reflected in their military service. It's from farmers who understand that you can't keep taking from the land. You've got to give something back to it. The land is something that gives to you, and there's a responsibility to give back to it. So it's renourished, it's replenished. Kids grow up with that value system, and they understand this country has given us incredible freedom, incredible liberties, the capacity to live in the greatest and strongest nation in the world, to be able to dream big dreams. And because of that, they understand and appreciate the need to give something back. And so they join the military in great numbers, and they provide extraordinary service. We want to keep that value system alive and well in rural America. To do that, you need an economy that supports families. To do that, we have to diversify the way in which we deal with our natural resources, and that includes a strong commitment to a cleaner burning biofuel, which we're going to see in force today. The Department of Agriculture is a willing partner in this effort, as we are with other federal agencies in our BioPreferred program, as we are with commercial aviation interests in our Farm to Fly program, the research that we're doing in our biomass centers, looking at a variety of ways in which we can help make this possible. We appreciate Secretary Maybus' leadership and his confidence in American farmers to help produce the feedstocks necessary to produce this fuel. We're excited about the Farm to Fleet initiative, and we appreciate Secretary Maybus and his vision. And we certainly am proud to be here today. I look forward to visiting with some of the men and women who serve and to thank them for their service.
Thank you, Secretary Vilsack. I'd like to now introduce the Commander of Naval Air Forces, our Air Boss, Vice Admiral Mike Shoemaker.
Well, thanks, John, and good morning. Welcome again, everyone. It's an honor to be here today to introduce our Secretary of the Navy and to help acknowledge and celebrate his vision, the deployment of the Great Green Fleet. Let me again welcome Congresswoman Susan Davis, Congressman Scott Peters, Agricultural Secretary Tom Vilsack, fellow flags and general officers, distinguished visitors, and members of our local community. Thanks for joining us this morning. Today, more than ever, U.S. national interests require the speed, endurance, flexibility, and autonomous operations unique to our nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, carrier air wings, and carrier strike groups. They provide a credible deterrent presence for our combatant commanders around the world, as well as options to rapidly respond to a wide spectrum of threats or natural disasters. The composition and maneuverability of our carrier strike groups, combined with the fully integrated capabilities of the embarked air wing, allow us to operate and project power in contested waters and airspace, enabling the U.S. to continue its role as the key guarantor of peace and stability around the world. This morning I watched proudly as 2 units of the Great Green Fleet Strike Group, the carrier USS John C. Stennis and the destroyer USS Stockdale, named for one of naval aviation's true heroes, get underway for deployment. Over the next few days, the aircraft from Air Wing 9 will quickly fill up the empty flight deck and operate from Stennis for the next 7 months in the Western Pacific, while also demonstrating the Navy's newest energy conservation initiatives. In naval aviation, we see the benefits of energy conservation daily in our carrier fleet, which is operated using only alternative fuel, nuclear energy, since the decommissioning of the last conventionally powered aircraft carrier USS Kitty Hawk in 2009. This alternative energy source is estimated to save the Navy 130,000 gallons of fuel per day. We're also working toward a future where our aircraft use 100% alternative fuel. Since Secretary Maybus put forth the Navy's energy goals in 2009, the Navy's fuel team has been actively conducting qualification testing on non-petroleum-based sources and certify them to produce JP5. One blend was successfully flown in over 100 sorties off USS Nimitz as part of the 2012 Rim of the Pacific exercise. And the fuels team will flight test the first 100% non-petroleum-based JP5 later this year. Diversifying our energy sources gives us operational flexibility and strengthens our ability to provide critical forward presence, turning the tables on those who might try to use energy against us. And many of the energy conservation measures that will be utilized by Stennis and Air Wing 9 have already been incorporated into our daily flight operations at our shore bases here in the States. The culture is changing. Every day, sailors and Marines think about ways to better use energy more efficiently, which makes us better at our jobs and more effective at executing our missions. It's now my privilege to introduce the visionary leader who established the goal of sailing a Great Green Fleet back in 2009. And today has the opportunity to speak to you in advance of that fleet's departure. The Honorable Ray Maybus is the 75th United States Secretary of the Navy and the longest to serve as leader of the Navy Marine Corps since World War I. Throughout his tenure, Secretary Maybus has focused on 4 key priorities: people, platforms, power, and partnerships that enable the Navy and Marine Corps' unique ability to maintain the global presence that reassures our allies and deters our adversaries. Leading the world's only global Navy, Secretary Maybus has traveled over 1.1 million miles and visited over 140 countries and territories and 48 states to visit with sailors and Marines forward deployed or stationed around the world, to maintain and develop international relationships, and to reconnect the American public with the Navy and Marine Corps, which he calls America's away team. Secretary Maybus also directed the Navy and Marine Corps to change the way they use, produce, and acquire energy, setting an aggressive goal of relying on alternative sources for at least 50% of energy by 2020. These goals have guided the Navy and Marine Corps to today's deployment of the Great Green Fleet, a concept first demonstrated in 2012. Secretary Maybus is a native of Ackerman, Mississippi, served as the governor of Mississippi from 1988 to 1992. He went on to serve as ambassador to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia from 1994 to 1996. Secretary Maybus also proudly served in the Navy as an officer aboard the cruiser USS Little Rock. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Secretary of the Navy, Ray Maybus.
Thank y'all so much, and thank you for being here. Admiral Shoemaker, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and Congresswoman Susan Davis, Congressman Scott Peters, to my close friend, former governor, and collaborator in this effort for the last almost 7 years, Tom Vilsack. There are so many people in the audience that have made this day possible that I'm not going to go down the list, but there is one person here you've been introduced to Admiral, former commander of the 3rd Fleet, Dennis McGinn, who is now Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Energy, Installations, and Environment. His predecessor in that job, Jackie Fannin Steele, is sitting here today too. It was under her leadership that this began, and Admiral McGinn has carried it forward to great success. So, this may be the most formal ceremony I've ever attended to celebrate everyday operations. That's exactly the point. We're just deploying the Great Green Fleet. The Stockdale, the ship you see behind me, the Stennis that left a few minutes ago, and those that deploy with her won't look any different from any other carrier strike group. Later this morning, group of us are going to fly out to another destroyer to watch an underway replenishment using an alternative fuel blend, and that will look no different from our normal UNREVs. This deploying strike group, these routine operations, is exactly what the nation counts on the Navy and Marine Corps to do. Secretary of State John Kerry said last week in his address to the National Defense University, the United States will remain more engaged in more places in the world than at any other time in history. The Navy and Marine Corps uniquely provide presence around the world, around the clock, ensuring stability, deterring adversaries, giving our leaders options in times of crisis. As Admiral Shoemaker said, Navy and Marine Corps are America's away team. We don't get any home games. We're not just in the right place at the right time, we're in the right place all the time. We get on station faster, we stay there longer, we bring everything we need with us, and because we're operating from sovereign American territory, our ships, we don't have to ask anybody's permission to get the job done. Now back in cold, snowy Washington, the words posture versus presence, there's a debate, they're bandied about, as if it's a choice that you've got to choose between the two. But for the Navy and Marine Corps, our posture is presence. That's what we do. When Theodore Roosevelt sent the Great White Fleet around the world 110 years ago, he did it as a show of the Navy's strength and our ability to project that strength, to be present. He understood how important it was for the rest of the world to see the U.S. Navy paving the way forward for our country. And he did it without enough money to bring the fleet home. He was confident that Congress would appropriate the money once it got halfway around to bring it back. And they did. As President Obama discussed in his State of the Union last week, the American way is to blaze a trail. When another president, John Kennedy, announced in 1961 that we would go to the moon and back within a decade, a lot of the technology required hadn't even been invented. We have never been a nation to shy away from bold ambition. And with that thought in mind, in 2009, as you've heard, I set some pretty aggressive energy goals for the Department of the Navy. So I want to talk today a little bit more than just about the Great Green Fleet. I want to talk about the journey we've traveled these past 7 years, and more importantly, the direction we're headed. The Department of Defense is the world's largest user of fossil fuels, and the Navy is more than a third of that. So when I took this job almost 7 years ago, these issues made energy a priority because of how much it impacts our combat capability and because of the cost that it imposes on us. At the height of the fighting in Afghanistan, we were losing 1 Marine, killed or wounded, for every 50 convoys of fuel brought in. That's way too high a price to pay. The goals that I set were about one thing. They were about making us better warfighters. We're greener. Our carbon footprint is smaller. But those are good side effects. It's not the reason that we're doing it. It gives us a strategic advantage. It expands our options to fuel the fleet. Improving energy efficiency gives us a force protection advantage, taking convoys off the road and reducing the time our ships are with oilers at sea. And I'll give you one specific example of this flexibility. In Singapore, the oil refinery there is owned by China. Right down the road is an alternative fuel refinery owned by a Finnish company. Don't we need the ability to get fuel from either one of those sources? And wouldn't it be terrible if we hadn't certified all our ships, all our aircraft on alternative fuels, so that we do have that flexibility if the cause arises? Now, those of you who've heard me speak before, and as Admiral Shoemaker said, the four fundamental principles that I've tried to use to lead the Navy and Marine Corps are people, our sailors and Marines, platforms, our ships and our aircraft, partnerships, our strong relationships around the world and with the American people, and power, how we fuel that partnership. I'm going to take them in sort of reverse order. We wouldn't be here today without partnerships. Without the Secretary of Agriculture, without the Department of Agriculture. And Tom Vilsack's one of the most visionary leaders we have in America today. In 2011, President Obama directed the Department of Agriculture under Secretary Vilsack and the Department of the Navy to partner with the private sector to develop a domestic advanced biofuel industry. As a result, 2 years ago, we set up the Farm to Fleet program. At the time, Secretary Vilsack said it perfectly. America's Navy shouldn't have to depend on oil supplies from foreign nations to ensure our national defense. And rural America stands ready to provide clean, homegrown energy that increases our military's energy independence and puts Americans to work. Well, today this ship behind me is fuel with a blend that we bought from Altair, an American company close to here in Paramount, California. The fuel costs the Department of Defense $2.05 a gallon. I want to repeat that. This fuel costs the American taxpayer, costs the U.S. government $2.05 a gallon. Now, a lot was made in 2012 when we demonstrated the Great Green Fleet of the cost of the fuel. Well, yeah, we bought a very small amount. It was a demonstration. The world didn't stop in 2012. We paid $26 a gallon then. We're paying 13 times less today, just 3.5 years later. That's the story. That's the success. $2.05 a gallon. We only have 3 requirements for biofuels. One is that they be a drop-in fuel. We're not changing our engines. We're not doing anything. It has to be exactly the same. 2 is that it takes no land out of food production. And 3, that it be cost competitive. Well, today, even with the dramatic drop in oil prices, it's competitive. It's competitive today, and using the market Defense Logistics Agency bid out this fuel, and this is what came back. Cost competitive, $2.05 a gallon. And I want to thank the Defense Logistics Agency, DLA. They were the people that actually bought this fuel. 77.7 million gallons, the largest purchase of biofuels ever undertaken. DLA, using the tools that it has, using the marketplace, has successfully brought us to this day. And we're not the only ones going here. Private sector too. United Airlines, Alaska Airlines, Cathay Pacific, Southwest Airlines, UPS, FedEx, all buying alternative fuels for their aircraft. And on the ground, FedEx, UPS, and even Disney buying alternative fuels to fuel their ground fleets. By having both the military and the commercial world do this, it expands the market and it lowers the cost. And all these companies I just named are in business to make money. They're buying this because it's a better idea. They're buying this because it makes them better and more efficient. We're working around the world. We have agreements now with Chile, with Italy, with Australia on alternative fuels. And that brings me to another P, platforms. As Admiral Shoemaker said, every single ship in this strike group is operating on alternative fuels. The carrier, most of all. Nuclear power, one of the original alternative fuels. We're rebuilding the fleet. On 9/11, 2001, the U.S. Navy had 316 ships. 7 years later, at the end of 2008, we were down to 278 ships. And in that 7 years, the Navy put 41 ships under contract. Not enough to keep our fleet from shrinking more, and not enough to keep our shipyards in business. I took office almost exactly 7 years ago. By the end of this fiscal year, with the ships we've already got under contract, with the ships we've got authorized and appropriated from Congress, in these 7 years, we will have put 84 ships under contract with a 20% smaller overall top line. We're going to get the fleet back to where it needs to be, more than 300 ships, by the end of this decade. We're not just doing different sorts of fuels, we're also using those fuels way more efficiently. Two of our newest amphibious ships, in fact one of them left this morning, the Macon Island, run on hybrid drives. Macon Island, in her first deployment, they've got normal diesel for speeds over 12 knots, electric power for speeds under 12 knots. On its first deployment, Macon Island brought back almost half its fuel budget. But maybe even more important, they stayed out 44 days longer than they would have without that. That's the reason we're building all our big deck amphibs with hybrid drives. It's the reason we're beginning to retrofit some of our destroyers with the same thing. And finally, people, our sailors, our Marines. The cultural shift in the Navy, the cultural shift in the Marine Corps is what's driving all this. The innovation is coming from the fleet, it's coming from the deck plate, it's coming from the field with the Marines. All you have to do is look out here. Marines hold 2 XFOBs a year, Expeditionary Forward Operating Bases, where they invite industry in. What have you got in terms of alternative energy? If it will help the Marines, they buy it from them. And it's everything from small, portable, rollable solar blankets. It saves a company of Marines 700 pounds of batteries so that they don't have to be resupplied, so that they don't have to be dependent on a convoy, to these portable solar panels, making energy where they are. We've got a thing called Task Force Innovation, and there's a website called The Hatch. You can enter things if you're in the fleet. This is how we can do things better. We had a chief that years ago said, put LED lights on these ships. Well, we're doing it now. Every time we pull a ship into a shipyard for an availability, we're changing the light bulbs. Stockdale has LED lights. It saves that ship 20,000 gallons of fuel a year, just changing the lights. And it gives you better light, and you don't have to change them nearly as often, years versus a few months. Sailors are doing things like using an energy dashboard to give them in real time exactly what they're doing and how they're running the ship and what that's doing in energy. As our CNO, Admiral John Richardson, said, everybody's pitching in here. We're making every kilowatt go further, every gallon of fuel count, and it's making us a smarter Navy. The Marines, as Marines always are out front with things like the solar blankets, but also with kinetic systems for their backpacks and knee braces, so that you can take a Marine's energy as they're humping all that stuff and turn it into real energy, so that they can power their radios, so that they can power their GPSs. And I invite you to take a look at these displays all across the pier. We're doing it for one reason. We're doing it to be better at our jobs. We're doing it to be a better Navy, a better Marine Corps. We're doing it to make better warfighters. So finally, back to power. In 2009, we said we'd demonstrate the Great Green Fleet in 2012, and we would sail it in 2016. And here we are today. But another goal was that by 2020, as the President put in his State of the Union in 2012, by 2020 the Navy would buy half its shore-based energy from alternative sources. We're a seagoing service, but we do have 3.5 million acres of land and 117,000 buildings, so we use a little energy on shore. We use 2 gigawatts a year. As Congressman Peters said, a few months ago we announced the biggest purchase any governmental agency had ever made of alternative fuels, solar power, to power 14 bases in Southern California. Well, let me tell you, onshore, we're there today. We've got either in the ground or in procurement 1.1 gigawatts of alternative power for our bases. We did it 5 years early. 5 years early. And here in California, we put in the largest RFP for electric vehicles, for the lease of electric vehicles in history. More than 400 to use on our bases. It's a product of another partnership with the state of California, and it keeps us heading toward our goal, reducing oil use in our non-tactical fleet by 50%. Now, when I talked about setting these goals, some people were, I'll put it this way, skeptical. But let me show you how far we've come. A recent report from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisitions, Technology, and Logistics said that the Navy's demand for oil from 2009 until 2014 went down 15%. We're using 15% less oil. Marines are using 60% less oil in the same time. The Navy has always been a leader when it comes to energy innovation. Sail to coal in the middle of the 19th century, coal to oil in the early 20th century, pioneering the use of nuclear in the middle of the 20th century. And every single time there were naysayers. You can't do this. You're trading one thing that's free, the wind, for something that costs you money, coal. You're trading all these coaling stations around the world for an unproven source of fuel, oil. You will never make nuclear power small enough or safe enough to put on a submarine or a carrier. And every single time they were dead wrong. And they're wrong again this time. And we're proving it. This is one step today. A foreign chief of the Navy one time told me that the difference between soldiers and sailors was that soldiers looked down. They saw lines on a map. They saw obstacles. Sailors looked out. They looked to the horizon. They saw no obstacles. They saw the open sea. They saw no lines. It's that way with energy. I couldn't be more proud of what the sailors and Marines have done to free us, to give us operational flexibility in terms of energy, to reduce the amount and the types of energy that we're using. The Navy and Marine Corps are going to continue to lead in this as in many areas. Their eyes on the horizon, the greatest expeditionary fighting force the world has ever known. From the Navy, Semper Fortis, always courageous. From the Marines, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Secretary Maybus. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. This marks the conclusion of our event. We invite you to check out the static displays and learn a little bit more about the Great Green Fleet and how the Department of Navy, the Department of Agriculture, and our partners are committed to increasing our combat capability through energy efficiency. For members of the media, Secretary Maybus and Secretary Vilsack will be available to take your questions shortly. Thank you all again for being a part of the Great Green Fleet kickoff ceremony. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, with all due respect to the remarks in terms of the positivity and answering your critics, they feel they're in a better position than ever simply because the current oil situation does not appear to be cyclical and that America is producing more oil than ever and that this isn't just a trend, so to speak, and shouldn't we be spending the money elsewhere?
Well, you heard this is competitively priced. This costs the same amount as regular fuel did. What this does is it makes us better warfighters. It gives us an edge. And right back at you, with all due respect, we got 3 ships right out here that are nuclear. They cost 4 times as much as a conventionally powered carrier. 4 times. Should we quit doing that? No, because it gives us an edge. It gives us a combat advantage. And the example I gave of Singapore, do we really want to be dependent on a Chinese oil company for our fuel? Or should we be able to go down the street and buy an alternative fuel from a Finnish company?
Okay, can I add on to that? This is not just about the military, it's also about commercial aviation. The reality is we need 17 to 19 billion gallons of commercial aviation fuel so that our commercial airports air flights can basically compete in an international travel with emission standards. So this helps the emission standards, it helps the commercial aviation industry. It's a job creator, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs that are connected to this particular industry. It helps to stabilize the price of crops. You know, these same members of Congress are going to find out that the commodity prices are a little soft right now. This is helping stabilize the rural economy. So you have to look at the totality of all this. You got a commercially viable and competitively priced product that helps promote jobs, helps stabilize prices, and helps to develop the technology that the commercial aviation industry can use. It's a winner for the country. There's no question about that.
$2.05 a gallon. How much subsidies goes into that from the Department of Agriculture?
None into that 205. 14 cents a gallon goes straight to the producers. And that's a bridge to get us to basically from a brand new industry to a mature one.
But how much of that supply chain is being subsidized by the Department of Agriculture?
Well, it's essentially 14 cents. 14 cents.
So the cost to the taxpayer is actually $2.19, right, per gallon? I'm sorry to ask a devil's advocate question, but this blend is 90% regular fuel and 10% biodiesel. So your critics might say, what's all of the cheering about if it's only 10% biofuel? Are you at all disappointed that you had to go with a 90-10 blend in order to meet the price point?
Well, this is the market. This goes to price of oil's gone way down. This was bid out. Give us the best blend you can give us. This was what came back. But we're not static. This is 2016. Our goal is to be at 50% by 2020. And by doing this, this is a huge step. This is a huge victory, as Tom Vilsack just said. This represents a step that makes us a better military, that makes us more flexible, more strategic, and more tactically operational. And in 2000, pick your criticism. In 2012, it was you're paying too much for it. Now it's not enough percentage. This is the new normal. And you're going to see the percentages continue to go up as the industry matures, as companies like United and FedEx and UPS and Cathay Pacific and on the ground Disney are moving toward alternative fuels. They're in business to make money. They're doing this because there's a basic underlying reason to do it.
Yeah. You also have to understand that we're actually in the process now of working with several companies that are focused on 100% drop in aviation fuel. And so this is a first step towards the ultimate goal, and that ultimate goal is going to use things like municipal landfill waste, so we can reduce landfill and methane emissions because of that. It's going to use woody biomass, so we're going to have less fire risk in the western part of the United States. It's going to use agricultural waste products so that we stabilize farm income and rural incomes. There are multiple benefits to this industry, far beyond the benefits to the military, that you have to factor into why this is such a big deal and why it's important. I have no doubt within the next 3 or 4 years, you'll be seeing a ship that's basically operating on a much higher blend, if not 100% blend.
To go off topic, a lot of troops and vets have told me they feel integrating women in the military in those combat roles means we'll be burying more troops. What do you say to that?
Well, what we have said is, number one, you set standards. You set standards for, and you're talking about in ground combat, because women are in combat every single day. You set standards, and one of the things we found out was a lot of these jobs did not have standards. You set standards, physical standards. They have to be job related. They have to have something to do with the job. And you do not lower those standards. Those standards are not ever relaxed. Those standards are not ever lowered. And then gender becomes irrelevant. If you can meet the standards, why should it matter if you're male or female? Why should it matter if you're straight or gay? Why should it matter? As long as that Marine
knows that the Marine on either side of him, on the line, him or her, has met the same standards, has had to go through exactly the same thing to get there, why does it matter? Gender should become irrelevant.
Mr. Secretary, on that note, there is a local congressman who is not here today. His name is Duncan Hunter. You are aware of his letter to the Defense Secretary. It was pretty scathing.
Look, I've got that letter framed. That's one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten.
Mr. Secretary, about energy efficiency, because you're doing a great job on the operational level, but getting to change habits in your soldiers and your Marines and your sailors, how are you doing that?
Well, we're doing it in a lot of ways. One is we're changing the types of engines that we have. We're going to hybrid drives on a lot of our ships. Second thing is we're doing stuff like changing the light bulbs. We've got hull coatings, we've got stern flaps on ships. We're doing voyage planning, so we go with the tides, with the currents, with the wind instead of against it. And as I said, we're using 15% less oil than we were in 2009. We're in the Navy. The Marines are using 60% less because of the changes they have made.
And they're buying in, the soldiers in the field, are you getting positive feedback?
Actually, it's Marines in the field.
Sorry.
But, oh yeah, it makes them better fighters. They have to carry less. They can make their fuel where they are. And they're not losing Marines guarding fuel convoys the way they were.
Ladies and gents, we have time for one more question.
Secretary Vilsack, could you tell us what type, if any, congressional actions you need to assist in the further development of these markets?
You know, honestly, we don't need any positive, proactive effort by the Congress. What we need is for them not to basically create barriers or difficulties in terms of utilizing the programs that we have that can provide assistance and help. We are very committed to this industry because we know it's a job creator, we know it creates choice, we know it's a cleaner burning fuel, we know it's going to create new job opportunities, particularly in rural areas that need manufacturing and processing. And so we just simply ask Congress not to interfere, not to create barriers as they sometimes do. You know, we're dealing with a number of issues right now on other commodities where Congress has restricted our capacity and our flexibility. We just simply don't want them to do that in this particular space, and they haven't. You know, the one thing that people don't realize is how energy efficient this process has become. And I want to emphasize this point because I think a lot of people think that biofuels are energy users, but in reality there have been incredible advancements in the production of this to the point where you're now seeing significant energy savings in terms of producing biofuel. And I think people will be surprised how much of a leap this industry has taken in just a few short years.
And the biofuel here was made from beef tallow.
Beef tallow.
Okay.
From the Midwest.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
We'll start the caravan to the